Black tape. Good morning. Welcome to beautiful Calgary. We are here because Albertans deserve to know the truth about what an NDP government would mean for them. In 2015, the NDP talked about a carbon tax, but they didn't campaign on it. And what was the first thing they did after the election? Well, Albertans received a carbon tax. They said they'd always been clear that they wanted a carbon tax, but they absolutely did not campaign on it. Now we know the NDP isn't being honest about their plans for electricity and what that means for Albertans. Well, it means skyrocketing prices. Albertans shouldn't be surprised that Rachel Notley and the NDP are trying to pull another bait and switch in this election. But this time, we know her strategy. And we're sharing with Albertans the NDP policy that the NDP don't want to talk about this election. Like the carbon tax, it is a policy where Rachel Notley and Justin Trudeau agree. And like the carbon tax, it is a policy that particularly hurts Albertan families. Albertans across this province should be very concerned about Rachel Notley's commitment to Trudeau's net zero electricity grid by 2035. Why? Well, because it's the most expensive political promise ever made in Alberta history. It's not only unrealistic, but it's also very dangerous to the long-term viability of our economy. Everyone from moms and dads, business owners, farmers, right across Alberta would bear the brunt of this anti-Alberta policy that comes straight from the desk of Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau knows that the majority of Canada's fossil fuel generated electricity is produced here in Alberta. Now, Alberta used to make electricity from coal, but we got off coal. Rachel Notley phased out coal on such an aggressive timeline that it cost Albertan families billions of dollars and continues to do so. You're seeing that right now on your bills. It's important to reduce emissions. We have a plan to do that by 2050. And let's remember, in the last decade, Alberta replaced almost all its coal power generation with new natural gas-fired electricity, and it cost Albertans several $billions. Now, Trudeau has declared war on these new natural gas power plants that Alberta installed. And Rachel Notley, surprise, surprise, has made that her policy. Notley doesn't want you to know how much this will cost. Notley probably doesn't care how much it will cost because the NDP, it always seems to never remember that it's your money. It's Albertans' money and they work hard for it. It's not the NDP's money. Independent analysis says that even if this can be done, it will cost Albertans and the Alberta economy at least $87 billion. And yes, folks, that's billion with a B. AESO, Alberta's independent electricity systems operator, published a report last year that meeting the pure power generation part of this Notley-Trudeau promise will cost $52 billion. But we wanted to know what the cost would be to the broader Alberta economy as well. So we had Navius Research, one of Canada's most respected environmental ecometrics firms, do the costing. They found that the opportunity cost to Alberta's economy will be a further $35 billion between now and 2035. If we are retrofitting power plants, we aren't building other things in our economy, and Alberta will lose $35 billion in GDP because of that. $52 billion in building costs, $35 billion in opportunity costs. And my friends, that's not all. Neither AESO nor Navius were able to actually estimate the cost of converting Alberta's cogeneration electricity sector to net zero by 2035. But it will undoubtedly be dozens of billions more. Further, since the timeline set by Trudeau and Notley for meeting this net zero grid component is less than 12 years away, it will be impossible for Alberta to build new hydro dams or SMR power plants or other alternatives in time. Alberta will not be allowed to build reliable, non-emitting power plants because of this reckless Notley-Trudeau policy. The UCP knows we need to have a healthy mix of solar, wind, and baseload. But the NDP plan could destabilize Alberta's electricity grid and put Alberta's electricity grid and Albertans at risk of brownouts during extreme weather. I'd please like to invite my friend Rebecca Schulz.
Well, thank you very much. Now, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. There's campaign Rachel Notley, and there's Premier Rachel Notley, and Albertans deserve to know just what Rachel Notley has in store for them. Rachel Notley and Justin Trudeau's accelerated plan for net zero electricity by 2035 will cripple Alberta's economy and hurt Albertans. I hear from Albertans every single day that affordability and the cost of living are top of mind issues for them, and power bills are high enough. I know that Alberta's businesses feel the same way. This NDP promise will impact all Albertans over the next 12 years. I'm sure it won't be one of their major campaign announcements, but it is something that the NDP is planning to do. Rachel Notley wants to sneak the most expensive promise ever made in Alberta politics past Albertans. We won't let her because we are putting Albertans first. For the last few weeks, the NDP have called press conferences to announce all sorts of minor provinces. But this particular commitment will cost the Alberta economy at least $87 billion by 2035, and they don't want Albertans to notice. So how do we know that this is on their agenda? Because it's something they've been talking about. In 2021, in a members-only speech at the NDP AGM, Notley first committed that an NDP government will force Alberta into a net zero electricity grid by 2035. In the last couple of weeks, she said the same thing once again in a tweet. No press conference, no campaign briefing, no details, just a tweet. Notley doesn't want Albertans to know how much her commitment to Trudeau's net zero grid by 2035 will cost. Just like she did with the carbon tax, Rachel Notley has put signing on to Justin Trudeau's anti-Alberta policies ahead of looking after Alberta families and businesses. AESO estimates that this plan to rush the net zero grid over the next 12 years will raise electricity costs for families and businesses by at least 40% more than they might otherwise. Seniors on fixed income and small business owners don't deserve that. Rachel Notley is a threat to Alberta's prosperity, and just like she did the last time, she will make life more expensive for every Albertan if given the chance. Unlike the NDP, our government has committed to reasonable measures and aspiring to a net zero energy sector by 2050. Our major industries are already reducing emissions, and over the next almost 30 years, industry will continue to innovate and invest in the long term to make a real difference. Rachel Notley has instead chosen to risk Alberta's prosperity, our future, our economy, and our affordability advantage with the most expensive promise ever made in an Alberta election. She doesn't care about the cost to Albertans and to our economy. Albertans deserve to know what the NDP has in store because Albertans can't afford Rachel Notley and the NDP. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, for reporters in person, just on the left line up, we're going to take one question, one follow-up, and we will start in person. If anybody has any questions, please step up to the mic and ask your questions.
Perfect. See you guys later.
Good morning, Jason Marks from CBC News. First off, as a parent of young kids, I appreciate the shocking revelations pun. But I wanted to ask you, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you, yesterday, Artur Pawlowski was convicted. Now, I know that your leader, Danielle Smith, does not want to comment on this because of her ethics commissioner investigation. Now, I don't think that would apply to you, any of you, unless you happen to be investigated and don't want to self-implicate. But how do you explain to voters when you meet on the doors and they ask you, why did she talk to Artur Pawlowski about his charges?
You know, on any given day when you're an elected representative, or like some of us who are on the leadership campaign trail, we talk to Albertans every single day. We hear their concerns, we hear their issues, and we commit to get back on certain processes that need to be followed. In this case, the Premier did exactly that. She got advice on the process to follow. She took that advice, and now when it comes to this specific case, the courts have made their decision.
Was it, in your view, a perfect phone call that she handled?
I would say, again, as elected officials or those aspiring to be elected officials, we do take a number of questions from a variety of Albertans on a variety of different issues. I personally often commit to looking into details and getting back to people. What our leader did here was get advice from the Ministry of Justice. She followed that advice, and now the courts have made their decision.
Thank you, Jason. Next question.
And to be clear, I have not heard that on the door. I've been knocking on a lot of doors, and what Albertans are worried about is affordability. They're worried about being able to afford their electricity bills, being able to afford their natural gas bills, and that's what they're worried about.
Alex Dollywell, Rebel News. My first question is, in a CBC interview in October, Premier Danielle Smith opened the possibility of the province relitigating the constitutionality of the federal carbon tax with the Supreme Court of Canada. Now, have there been any further conversations as to whether that will be pursued in the near future?
Well, listen, this government, the UCP, is always going to stand up for Albertans, and the carbon tax is something that puts a tax on everything and makes life more expensive for Albertans, and especially for Albertans when you take into consideration how everybody else is dealing with the carbon tax, and especially when you take into consideration this particular issue of electricity and the electricity grid. This is going to hurt Albertans harder than it's going to hurt anybody else in Canada except for maybe Saskatchewan, and we need to make sure that Albertans realize this before Election Day, how significant this promise is by Rachel Notley.
Alex, follow up.
Yes, I do. So in recent weeks, we've seen the official opposition pick winners and losers in terms of which members of the press they will take questions from. Recently, we saw Rachel Notley kick out Keem Bexty and myself from a press briefing in downtown Calgary. Now, can we get a commitment from the UCP that they will allow all members of the press, regardless of where they land on the spectrum, that their questions will be answered and they will have that opportunity to ask those questions?
Our team and our leader have been committed to taking questions from all media outlets. We saw that earlier this week at our very exciting campaign announcement to reduce personal income taxes for Albertans. Premier continues to take questions from media on a daily basis, as do we. And as you see here today, we're happy to take questions from all media outlets.
Thank you.
Next question in person.
Sean Polzer, Western Standard. What would be a UCP plan to lower some of these electricity costs while presumably reducing emissions? Are you prepared to roll back the coal ban, or would you increase natural gas or wind and solar, or what?
Well, we've seen significant costs to Albertans over the last decade because of some of the steps that Rachel Notley took as premier. She made these decisions very quickly and without a lot of forethought and planning, and we've seen that in the documents since, and we're not going to do that. We're going to follow, of course, our commitments, but we're going to fight every step of the way in our jurisdictional right to do so as Alberta, and we're going to make sure that the federal government stays in their lane. By the way, their lane is not electricity, and they should not be trying to enforce something that is outside of their jurisdiction like electricity. So we're going to make sure we keep the electricity bills, like all bills, as low as we possibly can for Albertans. That's, you know, some of the great steps we've done so far in our affordability packages. It sees inflation in Alberta the lowest in the country, lowest gas prices in the country. These are things we can actually do, and we're going to, you know, there's no silver bullet. We need to do anything we possibly can to keep prices and affordability in a reasonable place for Albertans, and we're going to do that.
And a follow-up?
Well, may I just add first as well? What you see with the NDP is, again, ideology and allowing Justin Trudeau to determine what happens here in Alberta, where you have a united Conservative Party that is committed to absolutely having reliability, to reducing emissions by 2050, but making sure that electricity remains affordable for Albertans, because that's what Albertans want to see.
I read that ASO report, and one of the things that were in it is that electricity prices have doubled, nearly tripled in the past few years. And one of the reasons was the retirement of the coal plants, because coal has about 98% uptime reliability compared to about 50% for wind. So I guess my question is would you repeal some of these rollbacks on the coal ban?
Well, first of all, you know, going backwards in time isn't a great thing. Very often, and in fact, in this particular case, I don't think it is. What we need to do is make sure we comply with our international commitments, because that's what the federal government has the right to impose upon us to some degree, as long as it's within their jurisdiction. And we need to make sure that we're looking at the future. Some of the things in the future are SMRs and different opportunities to look at cogen and expanded cogen opportunities. Those are things that make a lot of sense because they lower power bills for Albertans. But we, you know, can we point to any particular thing that we're going to roll back in time? No. But if there's new technology that comes forward that shows that we can have very clean coal and do so in an environmentally consistent way with what the expectation of the world is, then we're going to do that.
And I think what your question points out is really how bad the decisions and the governance of 4 years of NDP government was for Albertans. And, you know, when Albertans do ask about affordability and their bills, when I am on the doorsteps, this is something that I hear fairly regularly. And of course, Albertans are paying today for short-sighted decisions made by the NDP government that focused on ideology as opposed to focusing on affordability and reliability of our systems.
Thank you.
And can we get the next question in person, please?
Morning, Simon Jones, CTV. A couple questions just about the tone of the election so far. The NDP is currently running attack ads and digging up old controversial statements from UCP candidates. Are you worried at all or concerned about that tactic?
You know what? I think that it's fair for us to point out the NDP's record. I think Albertans have a right to essentially have that reminder of what the 4 years under the NDP government was like. It was devastating for Calgary, for Alberta. We lost 183,000 jobs. Investment in people were losing or leaving our province, at record rates. And, you know, I think what Albertans want to see is a plan that addresses the top of mind issues for everyday people. That means having a strong economy and opportunities for family. It also means affordability, like our announcement here today. Also transforming our healthcare system by focusing on feedback from the front line and making sure that we have a system that works for patients. And so when I think of what Albertans are going to want to see, they want to know that a party who wants to govern has a plan to balance absolutely our economy, our growing economy that is more diverse than ever before, affordability, and I think our record speaks for itself on that front.
And I think it's very fair to point out issues during the campaign that are not correct. For instance, suggesting that the UCP raised taxes 100 plus times is ridiculous and it is untruthful. We need to stand up and point that out so that Albertans recognize who they're voting for if they decide to vote for the NDP, and recognize they're going to increase their costs. Their home electricity costs, their heating costs exponentially higher than it's ever been before. They're trying to make the most expensive political promise of all time, and people need to know that. So pointing out the truth, absolutely. We will not lie, and we need to make sure that that the press and we hold the other parties to account when they do.
Follow up?
Yes, please. Just on that note, both of you ran campaigns for the leadership race, which were fairly critical of Premier Smith, now Premier Smith. Why do you think that tactic is going to work during the provincial election against the NDP?
You know, I would say in Danielle Smith, we have a leader that loves good policy debate and has taken the feedback from those of us in leadership, from our colleagues. She expects us to bring the views of our constituents to the table and has made changes to policy or to legislation to reflect those perspectives. And so I actually think that that's an excellent leadership quality. Now, while we're out here every single day making announcements that will benefit everyday Albertans, committing to not increasing the business tax, lowering personal income tax, and certainly there's more to come. I think that that shows that we're a party that's focused on the everyday issues for the vast majority of Albertans. Now, I do think that Albertans, they know that what's being shared by the NDP and Rachel Notley is not always truthful. And so more to come on that. I think we're happy to point out the NDP lies on any given day. I think we have a responsibility to do that because voters need to know what they can expect from their future governments.
Thanks, Simon. Do we have any more questions in person? If not, operator, could you please put through our first caller? Operator, could you please put through our first caller?
Josh Aldridge, Calgary Herald.
You can kind of hear it there. I think we just need the maybe not that high.
Hello?
We just have some technical difficulties. Josh, can you hear us?
Okay, I can now. Yes. My first question's on Danielle Smith isn't expected to make a real media availability until tomorrow. So this will be really the fourth day of the election. It'll be 3 days after the Pulowski decision. Would you like to see Smith address that decision prior to that? Because at this point, it's MLAs that are having to field these questions. It's allowing the NDP to run with it. Would you like to see Danielle Smith really address this? To this point, she's saying she's not commenting on it.
I'll say this, our leader is very busy campaigning across the province, and in Calgary we had a very exciting announcement with media availability this week when we made our commitment to add an additional personal income tax bracket and lower personal income taxes for Albertans. I know she was on the radio live this morning taking questions from media, and I do believe we have another exciting announcement coming up tomorrow. And so we'll continue to answer questions from the media and make sure that we are getting our messages out there. And there are a lot of exciting things for us to talk about in our United Conservative platform, so stay tuned for more.
Josh, do you have a follow-up?
I do. Are you concerned about how the Pulowski situation will impact the election going forward, especially when he makes the statements he made yesterday about there's more that's going to come out? How much does this distract from the issues and the policy that you guys want to talk about, especially in what's going to be a really close race in Calgary?
I'll say that we have already commented on this and the courts have made their decision. We are campaigning hard and we're making commitments that are going to resonate with everyday Albertans right across our province. And so I do hope that media chooses to share those platform commitments with Albertans so that they can make good decisions in the upcoming election and choose a party that cares about economic growth, hope, opportunity, affordability for families and seniors on fixed income, as well as a party that will make the necessary changes to ensure that our healthcare system is focused on patient needs and wants to keep Alberta moving forward.
Thanks, Josh. Operator, could you please put through our next caller?
Mary Kay, Globe and Mail.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. The announcement today looked at the cost of net zero by 2035. Your plan is net zero by 2050. How much will that cost?
Well, it's going to cost, anytime you take traditional power sources off the grid, it's going to cost Albertans. We don't know what it's going to cost by 2050, but we do know that we would be complying with the international commitments, and we believe that plan is reasonable. and is affordable. It certainly is a lot more affordable than trying to accelerate it over the next 11 and a half years, something that frankly nobody else in the entire world is doing. Listen, we have a very small amount of our power on coal right now and have relatively very small amounts of coal over Alberta's existence because of the nature of our population. If you look at China and India and the amount of their base that's on coal, it's staggering the difference. What we're doing is actually looking at technologies that we can showcase to the world and bring more and better opportunities to the world on electricity generation and on other forms of energy generation. And what we're going to do is not throw the baby out with the bathwater and do radical changes that are frankly politically driven and not done for the best interests of Albertans. We're going to make sure we do this in the best interests of Albertans.
And Carrie, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. So you're asking Albertans to look at this and say, Notley's plan is bad because it's going to cost it's the most expensive campaign promise of all time. But you're also saying, we also have a promise, but we don't know how much it's going to cost. Why should Albertans select the one where you're promoting is better, but you don't have a price tag?
So I would say that was where a couple of weeks ago, our colleagues and our leader did announce our plan to both reduce emissions while, maintaining affordability and not jeopardizing our economic growth and prosperity. Obviously, some of that still requires work with industry, but with what you see with the United Conservatives is a very practical, common sense approach to reduce emissions while making sure our economy remains strong and life remains affordable for Albertans. What you see with the NDP is ideology at all costs. In this case, that's a cost of $87 billion and completely disregarding affordability and reliability of our systems for Albertans. And I just don't think that that's what Albertans want to see moving forward.
And Carrie, let's be clear that there's no plan on cogeneration, and Alberta's base load is about just over 40% based on cogeneration, which, there's no federal rules on it, no certainty at least, and we don't know how they're going to treat this. So there is a staggering cost on Albertans to implement this, especially if they don't consider cogeneration or do consider cogeneration as far as being a pollutant that needs to be shut down. So, there's a lot of uncertainty here, but we do know this. Our plan is going to cost significantly less than the NDP's proposal, which is frankly more aggressive than anybody else's plan in Canada or in the planet that I can see.
And let me just point out, when we're talking about costs, $87 billion is a huge number. What this means for an everyday Albertan is an increase in costs by 40% more than they would otherwise be. I think that's the question for Albertans. Do they want to see their electricity costs going up by 40% of what they would otherwise be? I just don't think so, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie. Operator, next caller, please.
Radio Canada.
Hi, just right now, NDP leader Rachel Notley is announcing a new tax credit if she is elected to form government. And Alberta's future tax credit, which in their words, they say it would spur investment for clean tech, carbon materials, critical minerals processing, and advanced manufacturing. Do you think it will attract 47,000 jobs and 20 billion in private sector capital investment? What do you think of that?
I think the last time the NDP were in power in Alberta, we saw 183,000 people leave Alberta to find other jurisdictions. In the last 6 months of last year, over 90,000 people came back to Alberta and call it their home now. I think that's success, and it speaks for themselves. I think what the NDP does is promise things on ideology, thinking that they're going to win the hearts and minds of a people, and especially Albertans. And the reality is when people see how much it costs, when they actually get the bill, they realize the NDP is the wrong answer for them. They want a government that cares and that is smart about it. And that's exactly what the UCP government is, a caring and smart government.
And let's just be clear, the NDP is also planning to raise corporate tax rates. I don't think that worked out well in the 4 years of their government, when we then saw reduced corporate tax revenue coming into the province, and we saw head offices and jobs leaving Calgary and leaving Alberta. So I think their record does speak for itself.
All right, thank you. Follow up from Audrey?
Please, can I have yes, thank you very much. On another topic, actually, this Monday, the UCP announced a new tax bracket of 8% for people earning up to $60,000. Every expert we talked to said that this would increase the reliance on oil and gas revenues, which are today lower than what the province needs to balance the budget. So do you think that you are tying the Alberta government's hands by doing so and promising this?
Thanks, Audrey. Well, first of all, let's recognize that the oil and gas in Alberta belongs to the people of Alberta, and it's there for them and for the government to make sure that their lifestyle is affordable. And that's what we're going to make sure we do. And those people that are less fortunate sometimes, and obviously are in those lower tax brackets, and right now is a time of tremendous affordability needs, and the Alberta government's going to be there to pick up the slack for them and to make sure that they can afford what they need to afford, and make sure we can do all that we can to reduce their taxes so they can take more home to their family and make their decisions in the best interest of them.
All right, we got time for 2 more questions. Operator, please put through our next caller.
Marco, Calgary Herald.
Hi, yes. Can you tell me when would the UCP government propose to see a net zero power grid in Alberta?
By 2050, along with our international commitments.
Yeah, just to follow up, the federal government has made a commitment to a net zero power grid by 2035. It's a national commitment. I'm wondering, would the UCP government ignore it, litigate it? What exactly would be your plan for dealing with the federal target?
Well, I don't want to get too complicated into the constitutional rights of the federal government versus the provincial government, but if they go beyond their jurisdiction, which in my mind, if they go to a much more aggressive electricity grid than is required by international treaties, then they're stepping outside of their jurisdiction, and we're going to hold them to account and say, no, federal government, get back into your sandbox and play in your own area of jurisdiction, because you're not going to play in the Alberta government's jurisdiction, and we're going to make sure that we stand up for Albertans every step of the way. And this is one of those ways we can.
And, I would just point out that it's not just Alberta that has those concerns. I mean, we're seeing these concerns being raised by other provinces across the country, Saskatchewan, even Ontario. And so, I think what we're saying here is we are absolutely committed to working with industry to reduce emissions, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't hurt our economy and the opportunities that Albertans want to see created here every single day, and that it doesn't impact affordability and reliability of our system.
All right, operator, last caller, please.
David Staples, Edmonton Journal.
Thanks for taking my call. I'm curious, Ryan, you said that Notley and the NDP are lying about this, but isn't it true that Notley did just, and you mentioned this as well, that she's actually made the commitment public? Her tweet says from April 19th, Alberta's NDP will work with industry to achieve a net zero electricity grid by 2035 and a net zero economy by 2050. So, and, in her campaign speech, she said, you can trust me to do what I say. So she seems quite clear and quite committed, and they are going to do this. So where is she lying?
Well, David, let's see it. Let's see it in the proposed plan here, the campaign plan. If it's there, let's actually see it and let's talk about it. Let's talk about how much this is going to cost Albertans. Let's talk about the fact it's not costing in the cogen power that we receive right now. Let's talk about the reality is that it's probably going to cost Albertans over $100 billion. That's the promise that she needs to come clean with Albertans with, and she didn't do it with the carbon tax. When she brought the carbon tax, we saw years before that she pontificated about it. She mentioned it a few times, but she didn't put it in her campaign platform. We're saying right now, listen, you pontificated about this the same way you did with the carbon tax. Albertans they deserve to know how much this is going to cost them, and it's going to cost them a lot of money. When Albertans open up their electricity bills this month, they should think about that electricity bill not just doubling, but going up significantly more than that, which it will do based on Rachel Notley's promise to Albertans to bring in this piece of legislation.
And David, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so I'm just, the numbers you're throwing around are huge, astronomical numbers, $100 billion. So I just want to try to, if you can explain to me and other Albertans, we have an electrical grid right now. What changes, if we're to meet 2035, what changes in generation? What kind of plants are they going to be changing or retrofitting? What's going to be changed? And if, in terms of your plan that you say is going to cost a lot less by 2050, why will it cost a lot less? What kind of generation would you guys bring in? What kind of plants and retrofits would you bring in over time that would be less expensive? Why does it pay to wait in this case? Because that's the argument that you're making.
Well, David, I've seen the NDP come forward and implement policies before. They shoot first and ask questions later. That's not the way to do good politics and good policy decisions. We need to take time, make sure we get it right, have a proper plan in place, and implement it slowly so that Albertans don't feel too much pain like we have over coal-fired plants when those are shut down. What we're going to need to do is we're going to have to retrofit all our power plants. We're going to have to take electricity as being not a good source of power anymore, but a bad source of power, which I don't see. It depends on how it's created. But truly, David, it's going to be a staggering cost. Why is it going to be less? Because you're going to have better management skills in the UCP. We're going to talk to Albertans. We're going to attract other competitors into our marketplace so they drive prices down. We're going to make sure that we don't do things that cost taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure investments and other bad decision making that can happen if you don't do this right. This is a very important decision and series of decisions, and it's not done overnight. We need to make sure we do it right and rely on experts and empirical data to get it right every time.
And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, folks. Great to be here in Calgary. Happy campaigning.